Hello everyone, so this is very clear from the title of the video, but these are ways that you can shop for cheap or even for free in New York City. And this video actually goes to you, K10158. So you've actually commented in a video specifically when it came to me like reviewing a tablet, and you said like, hey, I love your personal finance videos, would love to see more of it. It made me think about like, what have I not covered already? And there's a lot. So I'm going to try to make it in a way where, just as an experience, this is me as a resident and born and raised in New York City. So there might be some here that are a little bit tough for people that are tourists in New York, but this is more geared towards you if you live in New York and you stay here for a long period of time. So that way you can definitely shop around a little bit. But I wanted to come up with this because I always think when people say, I'm trying to buy something very cheap, they immediately think like Shein or Temu or eBay, which is eBay's still okay, but there's a lot of other things that are out there that I feel like you can benefit from if you just paid a little bit more attention. And there's some that are here that I think a lot of people kind of overlook or don't even know about. So I'm going to leave that for the very end. So definitely stick around for that. I'm going to first start off, like I already talked about eBay, but secondhand and vintage stores. So this is in the hands of clothing, but you can also find secondhand electronics as well out there. So I've actually found them to be very helpful to get either items that are on a deal or items that are significantly cheaper. So when I say on a deal, I mean like, oh, you want to get a Chanel bag, you get it cheaper if you get it secondhand vintage, but it's not cheap. But you get it cheaper. It is on a deal. But you can also go to like vintage stores or secondhand or thrift stores and you can get things very cheap, and it doesn't have to be expensive. It could be something like, oh, a $5 t-shirt. If you just need a t-shirt or if you just need like a jacket or anything like that that works, like that's the perfect place to do it. That, again, I would say does take some patience, because if, let's say you're hunting for something like these boot cut jeans that are dark wash and your size, it might take some time to find it. But there's so many that are out there. Honestly, I'm not going to list them out there just because there's so many out there, but like just to give you some ideas of some places, you could go to like L Street Vintage. There's one run by two sisters on Dean Street in Brooklyn. I actually went there recently and bought a nice coat from there that's like at least 60 years old, but I like it. You can get so many things that are out there that are very unique. And back then, things were actually either handcrafted or higher quality than it is today, because they're not cutting corners with fast fashion. Even if you were doing fast fashion through these, you were technically going through another method where this piece of clothing or item actually has another way of life. So even though it's fast fashion, you are taking it out of the cycle and you're using it yourself. So I myself donate a lot to Goodwill, so I know good stuff is at Goodwill at the very least. But there's some very good places that are out there which has great deals. So if you look at vintage places, if you look at places like Buffalo's Exchange, or you look at like L Train Vintage, or you look at Salvation Army, there's so many things that are out there. I've even seen a vintage store with very cheap fur coats. Like, yes, I know fur coats are not good for the environment, but they're already made, you know, like at this case, like, yes, it's real animal fur, but it is being recycled back into the environment, in this case to you. So you're not necessarily creating waste, and this animal isn't going to waste. Like the worst case scenario of that fur coat is that it goes to waste, and you don't want that. At least it has another life with you. So that's what I would say is secondhand and vintage stores. On the same vein, you can go to Facebook Marketplace. I found amazing deals, and this is the one where it does require you to have some hunting and to basically like make sure you know what you're doing, because there's so many things that are out there that you're like, ooh, this will look great, but then you have to think about transportation. That's where it could get a little bit tricky. But I have seen that sometimes there are services where they actually literally ship it for you now. Like Mercari, I believe, does have a partnership with Facebook Marketplace, so if you wanted to get something, they would be able to make things happen essentially. But I've gotten my dining table, which is I think around $2,400, $2,200. It was basically over $2,000, and I was able to do it through Facebook Marketplace for less than that. Like literally, I saved $1,000. Was great condition. It's literally the dining table you see in my videos. Okay, it is so great because it's real wood. It's like solid wood, not like plywood or anything like that. It's expandable. And I didn't have to pay for shipping or like lug it up well, technically, yeah, I did have to lug it up myself, but for me specifically, I had to work with my mom to be able to put it in her car, and she was actually picking it up in Bronx. I Venmo'd her, I Venmo'd the seller, and then my mom picked it up, and we just basically, like, she brought it into the car, and she had to like remove all the seats and everything so we can get it. But this was back then when we were moving into this house, and we were like, yeah, we want this, we bought this. This was something I was already looking at, but I was like, do I really want to spend $2,000 on a dining table? Then I found this, I'm like, perfect. Like, the reason why she was selling it was because she wanted a different color, so it's like even better. That means like nothing is wrong with it. And a lot of times on Facebook Marketplace, I'm one of those people that do sell on Facebook Marketplace, like, we just want to get rid of it. And sometimes we're just like, let's see how much money is going to be sold for it. So we just sell it for like $50. See, there's a lot of people that respond to you. And I'm like, okay, well, in the case of the seller, there's a lot of people that respond to you and try to negotiate down. So you could definitely negotiate down depending on how, when it comes to like how negotiable they are. Like, let's say the condition and all that. Like, sometimes if you just really want to get rid of it, you could actually put it to the curb. And that's actually my third one. Curbside. If you go to the curb, and specifically in neighborhoods where it's not so high traffic, like Upper East Side, Upper West Side, Brooklyn, Queens, you put things to the curb, you could put a piece of paper and say free, or like it works. And in Brooklyn specifically, where I live, there's so many that are like that. Like, they literally put a couch up there, they put a sign that says free, or like it's good. And then sometimes I've even seen people do like a monitor or a laptop or a computer or something very expensive, like a TV, and then they put a sign that says, still works. And it's mostly because they're moving out of the city and they can't bring it out, or they just like need to move really quickly and they can't be bothered to sell it or give it away. Literally perfect for you. So definitely, if you want to go curbside, I've seen so many things out there. I have a fan in the living room that I got from Curbside. A free fan. It works so well. I think I saw so much like laying around in front of that building that day. Like, we picked up some organizers as well. If you really want to find good curbside, I would say aim to be either like the very beginning of the month or the very end of the month or the middle of the month, because that's when people are moving out. So when people are moving out, they're like, oh, I don't need this, but I don't want to go to waste, so I'm going to put on the curb. Sometimes they put signs on there, sometimes they don't. I've actually done that myself, even though I'm a little bit more of a high traffic area. I put it outside and I literally say, take it. Or I just like put in a box and there's a bunch of things in there that would be great. And I've literally seen people from my window go through it and they're like picking and choosing. I'm like, perfect. Like, why don't you do that? The downside is that if it doesn't get touched, then it gets thrown to the waste. But I have seen things like chairs that are put there, and they actually they don't pick it up until like a few days later. So I have like made the same route multiple times where I've seen multiple times that is still there. Like, for example, I see stacks of books literally on the curbside on their stoops, and then it's just sitting there. But it's not thrown away because it's not in the garbage. Like, it's actually in a different section altogether. So it does depend on if you're in a high traffic area, then if you put it out there, like, garbage is going to be garbage. But if you go to a place like Upper East Side, Upper West Side, Brooklyn, Queens, where you have stoops and like front yards or like basically a sidewalk where people walk through, if you're in a like relatively high traffic area where people do come by, even though it's a very relatively low traffic area and not like constantly so busy with cars and everything, people will pick it up. I was waiting for my aunt to give my like portable washer to her, and there was literally someone like eyeing it, and I'm like, no, it's not yours. It's for my aunt, okay? So curbside is definitely something you definitely should take a look at. And go prioritize going either the beginning of the month or the end of the month. And when I say that, I mean like 2 days before, 2 days after the beginning of the month. And that's usually when people are moving out anyways. And better if it's on a weekend, because if you go on a weekend, you have more time to just kind of look around, and people tend to be moving around that time anyways. They don't like to move around in the weekdays. And then if you were to do it, you could also do it the middle of the month. So like the 15th. Usually that's when other leases have also started or ended as well. So definitely check around them and check around the neighborhoods, like I mentioned, like Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, maybe not Staten Island, but like anywhere with a stoop. Like, there's a lot of stuff here. Like where I am, there's a lot of books, a lot of kids' toys, a lot of I've even seen furniture. And as I mentioned, I picked up a fan, and it was a really good fan. still in my living room. The other one that I wanted to mention is, this is something that I feel like a lot of people kind of overlook, but it is mostly because they're saving money on rent that they're doing this, is street stalls. So when I say street stalls, I really mean the unlicensed ones, the ones that are not technically supposed to be there, but they're there. But they tend to be very cheap. So if you think about like Union Square, Bryant Park, there's a lot of random street stalls that are there. Like they literally just have a table with a bunch of random things in there. Generally, a lot of those things are very cheap, or they're vintage, or they're secondhand. Like I always keep seeing jewelry, and it is cheap. Unless it is handmade, then it's not cheap. It's like usually more boutique in that kind of way. But I've seen a lot of like vintage pieces that way, that they're just like, here's all my stuff. And I've seen a lot of those kind of little marts where they make their own things, or this is just a bunch of random things that they're trying to get rid of. Those are things that you can definitely look at. Street stalls, however, tend to be on Venmo and cash. So that's another thing that you need to make sure that if you're doing something like this, make sure you have Venmo, make sure you have cash. And when you have Venmo, I mean like you have a decent amount of money, because what if you go really crazy? I am not talking about those smorgasbord ones though, because those are legitimate street vendors. They're very expensive to be vendors there. So generally the prices are a little bit higher and inflated. But I'm talking about the street stalls that are just on the street, randomly there, either like by themselves or in a bunch of street stalls like in Union Square, that they tend to be a lot cheaper, and they tend to be like very good finds. Like I've even seen some in Soho, so definitely check those out. I'm not talking about the knockoffs though, but you know, technically they are cheap, but they're not really that cheap if you think about like you're getting plastic. The last one is the one that I feel like a lot of people don't really know of until you actually move here and people are talking about it. I was born and raised in New York and went to college in Boston, but when I came back, I didn't even know about this until 4 years later. I was like, how did I only find about this now? It's the Buy Nothing Facebook groups. And if you're in there, you already know what I'm talking about. But if you're in the Buy Nothing Facebook groups, they're specific to your neighborhoods. And I highly recommend you to stick to your neighborhoods, like try to be a good citizen and not go to other neighborhoods for this. But like you go to the Facebook groups, you join your neighborhood's Buy Nothing group, and it could be multiple neighborhoods as well. If your neighborhood's kind of small, it might be lumped up with neighboring neighborhoods. You join them. They're generally people who are like, hey, I'm giving away this bar cart, which by the way, I got from Buy Nothing group. And I was just like, oh, that was such a great find. It's like $100-$200 bar cart. I now use for our barista coffee and tea area, but like that was such a great find. And like in the Buy Nothing Facebook group, sometimes it's so competitive. Like I have a colleague that lives in Chelsea. She tells me that like the moment that they post it, there's like 10 people already responding onto it. And some people don't really listen to the policies and rules where they're like letting it simmer and choosing people. Like I actually do a lot of Buy Nothing where I buy a lot, but I also sell a lot. But I mostly sell because I have so much clutter that I just don't like to throw it out to waste. So I put in the Buy Nothing group, and then usually it's just mostly like people just come and pick it up. So for example, the cat food experiment videos over here, I actually posted up a lot of old dry food that I had over there, and I just had it like, hey, anyone want some dry food from Hill Science Diet? Let me know. And then people picked it up. I've also had a bunch of things that are in the bathroom that are free samples, things I've never opened, things I would never use, but I just collected because it was free. And then I also gave that away as well. So those are going to refugees. So I actually feel a little bit better about that one. There's so many good finds in the Buy Nothing Facebook groups. Like I mentioned before, I got a bar cart from there. A bar cart, okay? The only thing I had to do, and also the good thing about the Buy Nothing Facebook groups is in your neighborhood. So you could literally go there, pick it up. I would only say like, it may get a little bit sketchy depending on where you are, because sometimes you might be like, do I really want to go to someone's place just to pick this up in the middle of the night? In this case, I would always recommend go to the middle of the day, and you can, depending if it's something you can be transported, go to like a few blocks away or a few steps away from your door, so that way whoever's picking it up or whoever you're selling to doesn't know where you live. Where I live, actually, I just give it in the lobby or in front of my building because I have a doorman, so at least I feel a little bit safer that way. But I also live in a high traffic area, so it's not necessarily going to mean anything. So these are a lot of the ways where you could shop cheap or even for free in this kind of way. I find them to be very helpful for very little niche things that people are just trying to get rid of, and you really just want it as well for other reasons. Or you're just trying to get rid of your own clutter. So as we're talking about spring right now, spring cleaning, think about things that you may want to give away. That's the thing about the Buy Nothing Facebook group, is that like it's not all about taking. Sometimes it's about giving as well. Think about your neighborhood, but Buy Nothing Facebook groups are so great. And I feel like there's definitely more in other neighborhoods, but when it comes to the Buy Nothing Facebook groups, it's really great in New York, at least, because you can get high quality, you can get low quality. You can get many different things, like, oh, give it to refugees or give it to a bunch of needy homeless people. Like, there are people that are out there on those Facebook groups that also collect for it. But also check Curbside as well, because sometimes they just can't be bothered, or they don't even know about this Facebook group and they can't be bothered to sell it, give it away. But I found it to be amazing to have that kind of community. It feels like you're in touch with your community, and it really feels good that you're connecting with your community as well. So you're also preventing zero waste in this case, because you're giving it away and you're receiving something that you actually need, and you don't have to spend any money. So let me know down below, how do you shop cheap or buy cheap, or in general, like, get things for free? These are my favorite ways. I think the ones that I use the most is really the Buy Nothing Facebook groups and Curbside. In general, I don't like to shop for money for like pre-loved or vintage items unless I'm looking for something in particular. Then I'm like, okay, then I would have to go for something like that, like specifically clothing or bags. Then I would go to places like RealReal. I've actually bought a few things from RealReal. I enjoy it. It's a lot cheaper than if you bought it at retail or in person at a store. Like, for example, a Chanel vintage flap. I actually got one for my birth year, 1996. So I got a Chanel 24 karat gold plated classic flap from 1996 through the RealReal, and it was like probably 50%, 60% less than the retail price that it is now. And like, we get 24 karat gold, better quality versus what you have now. So those are some options. Definitely not cheap for what I just mentioned, but it's definitely cheaper. But like, hopefully you can think about things about like, okay, maybe I should stop buying from Shein or Temu, or like very low quality and cheap places like Forever 21, H&M, but focus more about like what's currently out in your environment. Like, some people are giving away clothing because it just doesn't fit them anymore, or they don't like anymore. Like, there's so many like bridesmaids dresses, like, do you really need that again? No, probably not. So definitely consider that, because there's so many that are out there. So if you are, however, watching this and you're like, hey, I'm just a tourist trying to find places to go, there's so much vintage shopping that you can go to. So the secondhand vintage shopping, the Curbside, you can still benefit. I think the Curbside might be a little bit difficult because generally they're like bigger items, and by the time that you go to them, like the smaller or the very good quality or the good steel items are already gone. I've seen someone literally went to go pick up they saw like the standing desk in the middle of the road and they picked it up. I'm like, that's good, great on you. Like, if you were going Curbside, that's perfect. But if you're trying to find like a handbag or a computer, chances are someone already picked it up, especially if there was a sign that says it's working. So your best bet if you were traveling into New York and you're trying to find something that's cheap is the street stalls and the secondhand and vintage stores. So thank you so much, and let me know next time, like, what kind of personal finance or money or even NYC related content that you're looking for. This is what comes to mind when I'm thinking about like, what are things that I know of that my mom would know of? Like, she literally lived here as more years than me. Clearly she gave birth to me, but I don't think she knows majority of this. She actually doesn't even like secondhand goods because she's like, ooh, it's been used already. I'm like, I don't understand her. But yeah, let me know down below. Thank you.